You have lived here for last 30 years, right? We can take this in English. And you have also seen the Western life and so on. In Christianity, in Christian doctrine, like we say that in Buddhism, it says that suffering is a fact of existence, but maybe partially understood by many. In Christianity, they say that everybody has to carry their own cross, meaning that everybody has their own suffering. How suffering is really understood from your perspective, and in the Western world, the suffering, which is conceived in a very many different way, in a Christian lens and so on, how do you find a semantics? So can you describe a little bit what is really, why human beings do suffer, and this suffering is because of our bad relationship with the God, or it is because of our own ignorance? Can you give your own insights?
So, the word for suffering in Sanskrit is dukkha, and that Sanskrit term dukkha has some connection with another Sanskrit term chakka, dukkha and chakka, and in ancient times, like horse-drawn or animal-drawn carts on a very, what you call it, like primitive roads, as a, what say, as a passenger
Sure.
who boards on that kind of chariot or cart, has to encounter, bumpiness. So there's some connection between the Sanskrit term and dukkha and the chakka in that sense. So, according to Buddhism, suffering is the effect. Suffering is the symptom. And it's not enough to come out of suffering. Of course, one can make every effort to come out of suffering, but there's no guarantee that one will not come across another suffering. Therefore, it's important to find out the origin of the suffering, the cause, the source. And so as you asked the question, from where the suffering originates. According to Buddhism, suffering originates from karma and klesha. Karma and klesha. Klesha is like a defiled mind, impure mind, afflicted mind. And it can be broken down to, there can be numerous defiled mind, but it can be broken down to craving, which has its root in spiritual ignorance. Therefore, the origin of the suffering is, when our mind reacts with craving, which is rooted in delusion or ignorance, is responsible for creating our own suffering. So the suffering is not, given to us as a punishment by some externally existing metaphysical entity. And also when we, alternatively, when we have a good time and enjoy happiness, that happiness is also not considered as a reward that comes from outside, some kind of metaphysical entity. Whatever we experience, sukha or dukkha, is the result of our own, karma and klesha, our own creations. Let's say. Therefore, we are responsible, we are responsible for our plight and for our fate. So therefore, Buddha says, you can be your worst enemy and you can be your best friend. So therefore, no one like to be their worst enemy. So we have to come to terms with ourselves and become a best friend.
Sure, attahi atano natho, attahi atano gati. That is what the Theravadian also say around it. But you see, but when you see war in Ukraine, war in Middle East, here and there, innocent mother, children, and everybody, those kind of people are being suffered very heavily. So in that context, there must be other reason. It's not because of these small innocent babies or something who have committed that kind of thing. So that klesha, the klesha, karma and vipak, that klesha must have a root somewhere from that comes from somewhere. So when the Christian says that the original sin, which is transcended from, which is gone from one generation to another generation and that kind of thing. Here, how do you define those children's mothers who are suffering in the war now?
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, suffering is one of the universal reality. And so we are all what you call susceptible to the reality of suffering, despite our ages, genders, and so on and so forth. But when we encounter the suffering, when we face the suffering, how we face the suffering, how we relate to the suffering, how we deal with the suffering, there we can make a big difference. So that when you, let's say, when one comes across a suffering, ordinarily we end up suffering when we come across suffering. But let's say it's not necessary to end up suffering. Even when one faces suffering, if one knows how to relate to that suffering. Let's say, this, and that actually, comes back to the mind of the individual, what kind of mind we are carrying, right? If you are carrying a reactive mind, that reacts to the reality of the suffering that you face, then, the suffering gets, one end up actually magnifying the suffering. Suffering gets intensified. Whereas if one is carrying, a pure mind, then instead of magnifying the suffering, one will weaken the suffering. That doesn't mean outside suffering will go away, but at least in your mind, how you relate to the suffering, the suffering will not affect you as much as you react to that suffering, because you understand the reality of dukkha and the origin of the dukkha. So your, relationship to the suffering changes, not the suffering, but you don't become the victim of suffering.
So in any scenario, even though you do not know why I suffer that way, I have not done anything wrong here, I am innocently living this life, but somebody is bombing, somebody is, creating, fragmenting my body, my children's body, then if you are able to respond to that one with the wisdom, yes, but there the assumption is that that suffering also has a root, right, somewhere, the cause.
Actually, let's say in this case, the one who is bombing or the perpetrator of the crime, okay, he or she is committing his karma, but how you relate to that, how you how you relate to that is your karma. You understand? So let's, for example, what will be the good example? Let's say, you have a court case, for example, right? And then the court case keeps on dragging for years, right? And then at the end, the judge decides that on your part, there's no fault, right? You're innocent. Then you begin to wonder, why I have been suffering for a number of years during the course of this court case. You understand? Because the judge says, I haven't committed any crime, I'm innocent, right? Of course, the person who is persecuting you, okay, that's his karma, but how you relate to that incident and event throughout these years is your karma, right? And ordinarily, we end up suffering throughout those years until we are proven innocent, for example. And then the question arises, if I'm innocent, why I have been suffering for the last few years? You understand? So it's like suffering is not only what you call afflicted by others, but also we are taking how we relate also make us suffer, how we react to it.
Sure. So in the life of Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, when those people were crucifying him and the blood was oozing from his body, he was telling that, oh, my Father, please forgive them because they don't know what they are doing, right? So he is relating that they are ignorant, even though they crucify me, please forgive them. So here, the forgiveness is a greatest virtue in Christian wisdom tradition. But in Buddhism, I know that the compassion, here also Jesus was compassionate to those who crucified him, right? So forgiveness is there in Christianity and great compassion is here in Buddhism. What kind of karma it is to forgive somebody? And in which context one should forgive? And what is the magnanimity of forgiveness in our life?
Yeah, and let's see, responding with a compassionate mind comes from a pure mind or a balanced mind, right? And that's what Jesus being able to forgive the crucified originates from his pure mind, the pure mind that he's carrying. In Buddhism, also, like for example, okay, there's a victim and there's what you call perpetrator of a crime, okay, and ordinarily, whether you are Buddhist or not, or whether you are a believer or not, most people will naturally feel compassion towards the victim, but not towards the perpetrator. In Buddhism, you will feel compassionate, of course, to the victim, but more to the perpetrator. Because the perpetrator, you feel compassion because, this perpetrator of the crime, he's ignorant. Okay, he's full of delusion. He don't know what he's doing. He is harming somebody and harming himself. Therefore, one can generate more compassion towards the perpetrator in that sense than to the victim. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Not, responding with compassion to the victim and aversion to the perpetrator. That is the way of the world. But way of Buddhist way is to generate compassion both to the victim and the perpetrator.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So there is a semantics there, because the Jesus is also asking
Yeah.
forgiveness to those.
Yeah, because they don't know what they are doing.
They don't know what they are
That's
doing.
ignorance. And,
Sure.
yeah.
But again, in Buddha Dharma, as far as I know, the way to end the suffering that we are talking about is to create the right insight creation, and also how to renounce the ignorance through different marga and different ways. But in Christianity also, there are this other thing, I think, in somehow, but redemption, meaning that understanding our original sin and why God has sent only one begotten Son, Jesus Christ, and then He is there, here for us to take away our sin if we truly believe on Him and that God and all these kind of things, Here I see that in Buddhism, is it so that it is not this original sin or whatever, but it is your what kind of relationship you have created in this lifetime. But you can also relate to your past life, because for clash to, there is a cycle there. Clash, karma, vipak, and again this unresolved, ignorant kind of thing will all again come back. What do you think that is our parents, if they have committed something and they died out of ignorance, do that go next to the next generation or not?
I think there's a difference between Buddhism and Christianity in this regard. In Buddhism, there's no original sin. And there's an original something that is above and beyond sin and virtue, both. It's a transcendental reality. There's an original something which is above and beyond sin and vices, and good and bad.
Yeah, both virtuous and non-virtuous, yeah.
It's above good and bad. It transcends the duality of good and bad, or in other words, it transcends all forms of conceptually constructed things, like that kind of things. In English, we can say transcendental reality. And but that, original, you can say purity or transcendental reality is temporarily veiled by the presence of number of obscurations, right? And these obscurations are responsible for, these obscurations are the kleshas, and responsible for, let's say, our dukkha, right? And these obscurations being temporary, they are eliminatable. Whereas if the sins were original, they're not temporary. And something not temporary, you cannot remove it. You're stuck with it. So therefore, in Buddhism, the original virtue, which is above and beyond virtue and non-virtue, is a universal, you can say universal reality. We cannot do anything about it. That's how it is. It's like we are inherent with it. But then, temporarily, that transcendental purity is obscured. And this obscuration being temporary, they can be removed, right? What was your second question?
Well, let me ask you in the same one. But Lama, for example, in Buddhist wisdom tradition also, one of the thing is the Buddham Saranam Gacchami, surrendering to the Buddhas. So what is the problem when somebody says that one should also believe in Jesus and surrender to Jesus Christ? They are aren't they the same one? I mean, psychologically.
I don't know about Christianity, but I can say about Buddhism. When you say Buddham Sharanam Gacchami,
Yeah.
literally what you're saying is, I go for refuge to the Buddha. I rely on the Buddha, right? And but Buddha himself says, you have to be your own master. I cannot liberate you. I can simply show you the way to liberate yourself. I can simply show you the way to liberate yourself. Or in other words, I can simply show you the way to help yourself. But I cannot directly help you. You have to help yourself. That's what is meant by you have to be your own master. You can be your best friend, or you can be your worst enemy, for example. So therefore, when we say, I go for refuge to the Buddha, Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, that means Buddha has helped himself in the ultimate sense, in the most perfect sense, because he became a liberated person, enlightened person, right? And when you go for refuge to the Buddha, let's say, basically what you're saying, when you say, I go for refuge to the Buddha, what you're saying is, I am, committed to become Buddha myself, as inspired by you, So there is a, very subtle difference. I go for refuge to the Buddha because I'm inspired by your liberation, your enlightenment. So, but if the inspiration, if you get stuck with the inspiration, that will not help you. You have to get inspired so that you commit yourself to becoming enlightened yourself. So if going for refuge to the Buddha helps you to cultivate enlightenment in you, then you have gone for refuge in a proper way to the Buddha. And same with the Dharma, same with the Sangha. With the Dharma is, I go for refuge to the Dharma, which means I'm committed to walk on the path of Dharma. That means Buddha has walked and reached the goal, but we will not reach the goal unless we ourselves work. So going for refuge to Dharma is, okay, when you study Dharma, and theoretical aspect of Dharma inspires you to the extent it makes you walk on the path, then you have taken refuge to the Dharma.
What Buddha says about learning from the world, learning from the other wisdom tradition, since you live in this Western world for the last 30 years, right? And I know that many has come and asked you about transcending suffering and so on. But they may have a different heritage, different evolutionary history, different kind of, conditioning factors and this and that. And they may have responded differently, right? So do you think that there is a relevance of comparative philosophy and comparative religion, the wisdom from those things, in order to deal, in order to show, in order to bring the issues, the analysis of problem into a perspective using very many wisdom tradition, not only one single one. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, see, life is very short, and we also have a limited time and energy, and it's difficult to study everything, all the field of knowledge, even to completely study the theoretical aspect of the entirety of Buddhism is almost impossible, in one lifetime. I mean, Buddhist theoretical teachings. Like there are many, schools of Buddhism and many strands of Buddhism, and it's impossible to study them entirely. So therefore, here also you can say Buddha says that by knowing one thing, by knowing one, by knowing one thing, you get liberated from everything, something like that. I'm translating. What it means is it's good to study the most important thing. And the most important thing is to study your own mind.
Sure.
Your own mind and matter, how they influence each other, how they work in combinations. Not somebody else's mind and matter, your own mind and matter. Between mind and matter, also the most important thing is to study your own mind. So therefore, you say knowing single thing, helps you to illuminate everything. So when you know the one single most important thing, that's your mind, then even if you haven't studied many other things, you have studied one of the most important things about yourself. But then on the other hand, Buddha also says that, especially if you're a bodhisattva, walking on the bodhisattva path, who is, inclined towards helping many other living beings, then it says it's important to learn every aspects of knowledge, fields, because you never know with which knowledge you can help others. Not only knowledge, but even the art. It says all manners of art, all manners of knowledge. If you acquire it, it will come to a handy when it comes to helping others. So to the bodhisattva, Buddha says you have to acquire all the knowledges, because you never know with which knowledge you can help others.
Sure. So there is a semantic with Hinduism here. In Shiva Mahima Stotra, it says that Ruchi Ram Vaichitrad Rijukutila Namna Pathajusam Rinam Meko Gammem Tamasi Paisa Arnavahiva. Because of each individual have a very many different distinct interest, because they have a different sanskara, different kind of, different kind of mental model about the world and the way they view. But if they find a path that they have chosen in rightly, in their way, like the different river flowing from the Himalaya through different kind of geology, morphology of the land, they will finally reach to the same ocean, same understanding, same Shiva understanding. So like that, in order to end the suffering also, there could be a different metaphor, different example, different, alamban, what you call in Buddha Dharma also. Alamban, means that what kind of metaphor, what kind of drishtanta, what kind of example, what kind of visualization you do, like, like we have a different visualization that I have learned from you about Vajrasattva and these
techniques.
Yes. So now toward the final segment, let's talk about little bit about ending the suffering. How human being, which have a different kind of disorienting dilemma, many of the suffering they have never invited, they have never done bad karma in this lifetime, but they are suffering. How one can transcend from the suffering?
So, so like this, Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Sangam Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. I go for refuge to the Dharma. That means, I'm inspired to walk on the path of Dharma, right? And that is the way to actually weaken the suffering and finally come out of the suffering altogether by walking on the path of Dharma. And walking on the path of Dharma, coming out of the suffering cannot be done by Buddha, for you. You have to do yourself, and therefore he showed the path, and the path is there. And And the walking on the path of Dharma involves actually what you call, purifying one's mind, primarily purifying one's mind of the karma and the afflictions, and especially the reactive mind, and for which one takes up meditation practice, and and then whatever you encounter in your daily life, like the vicissitudes, ups and downs, ordinarily external circumstances kind of makes our mind fluctuate. In other words, we don't have a control over our mind. Our mind is controlled by the external stimuli, and therefore we lose the balance of our mind. Hence, we suffer, right? And Buddha says we cannot we cannot change others, and also we cannot change the world. We may try to change others. We may succeed with one person, but there's no guarantee with another person. Or even with the same person, if we succeed to change that person in this moment, in the next moment, he may, I would say, rise against you, for example. So therefore, external circumstances and situations that prompt suffering, we can try to change, and to a certain degree we may succeed, or largely we may not succeed. But if we change ourselves, by changing ourselves, it appears like everything gets changed. Actually, everything doesn't get changed because you change yourself. So to you, it looks like everything is in the right place. Okay. So therefore, what you call like for example, Buddha says, we are all struck by the first arrow. First arrow was which being struck by the first arrow, generates pain and so forth. But he says, since we are born, we are struck with the first arrow. That means death follows the birth, and death follows the birth, and the death is another arrow, and sickness follows the birth. Sickness is another arrow. Aging follows, and there are many other dukkhas that follows the birth, right? So therefore, we are stuck with the first arrow, but then he says we can protect ourselves from being struck by many subsequent arrows. We can help ourselves from being shocked by the many subsequent arrows. That means suffering that has its origin in the body, cannot be overcome indefinitely. But suffering, it has its origin in the mind, can be overcome totally, right? So when we take up the path, meaning walk on the path of Dharma and take up meditation practice and so forth, of course, ultimate goal is to attain nirvana, which is full liberation from all the dukkha, and not only dukkha, the origin of dukkha. But while you are walking on the path, every moment, liberation is a process. So every moment you succeed in liberating your mind that is responsible for creating your own misery. So maybe you are liberated from one moment or two moments, and this moment turns into few seconds, which can turn into few minutes, and so on and so forth. So therefore, liberation is a process, enlightenment is a process. It's not, the final goal, the full nirvana, is the culmination of this process. So even if one does not reach the final goal, if we can generate that moment-to-moment liberations especially when we face difficulty, that is a great relief.
Great. This moment to moment awareness, moment to moment liberation.
Yeah.
So these days in the universities, in very many places, they talk about mindfulness. I believe it is Sammasati from the Buddhist doctrine and so on.
Yeah.
The way you teach here in Norway, how mindfulness is understood, and in which form do you teach mindfulness to the people here?
Primarily, the mind, there's called 4 foundations of mindfulness taught by the Buddha. 4 foundations of mindfulness.
What are those?
Yeah, it starts with mindfulness of the respiration, breathing, and then the mindfulness of the body, the mindfulness of the feeling, and the mindfulness of the mind, and the mindfulness of the Dharma.
Phenomena, Dharma.
Yeah. So, but basically, it can be broken down to being mindful of the reality of one's mind and matter. These 4 foundations of mindfulness can be broken down to being mindful of one's mind and matter. How my mind is working with my body, how the body is influencing my mind, how the mind is influencing my body, what is their relationship, what is their connections, and so on and so forth.
Great. So Lama, I think there's also a matter of practicing and experiencing
Yeah.
than talking too much about it. I also teach mindfulness in our university. It's a part of our inner transformation. But since I am in this temple, in this day of Easter holiday here, today please, with your chanting and so on, please give me also a blessing or give me a kind of metta bhavana so that I will be also one day like a Buddha. Can you please?
Okay. Lo chuzon do bara chinge lap no su, chelam do bara chinge lap no su, nam truwa sel bara chinge lap no su, truwa yishe zo cha bara chinge lap no su. Simchen tamche dewa tam debe, yudan dem bara yuchi, dungal dan dungal gi pidan talwar, dungal me ben dewa tam bada, mindal bara yuchi, nyering chabang dan talwe, tanyam chimbola, ne paran yuru chi. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and this, all the teaching. Thank you so much, Lama. Thank you so much.